Hello, Aries. Welcome to a Mercury retrograde reading. I can tell in looking at this reading here that I've laid out that you are not in communication with your person. I can also tell that your person is not going to be coming back to you during this retrograde season. That is because they are leveling up right now and something a little bit more valuable is occurring. Let me explain. I'm going to show you the cards close up as we usually do. Starting with the Eight of Wands. The Eight of Wands card is in the reversal and is the card of fast action, movement, communication. And like an archer holding many arrows trying to hit a bullseye, this reversal position shows us that there is no movement, non-swift action, no bullseye hit at this point, and no communication. And it is sitting directly next to the Knight of Wands in the reversal. Now, the Knight of Wands certainly does get a bad rep when it's in the reversal. And no doubt that is somewhat the same energy that was described by Arthur Edward Waite when he created this deck, the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, and wrote about it in his book, The Pictorial Key to the Tarot, in 1910, where he described that the Knight of Wands is a card in the reversal that can mean division. Again, another energy of somebody who is not together with you and is not putting themselves in a position of communication. Why is that, though? Is sitting here in the story of the Four of Cups. The dynamic of somebody who could have what they truly want, could have a person given to them like a gift of the universe, and instead they look the other way. This is typically occurring in their own stubbornness. Their refusal to see something that's right in front of them. What I like, though, is that the Knight of Wands card is being paired later with the King of Wands. They are going through an upgrade. They are going through a cycle. I'll show you something that most people miss in the story of the Knight and the King, as well as the Page of Wands. You see, originally on the Page of Wands, we have the Salamander. On the Page of Wands, you will see the Salamander is never quite in a full circle like it is on this card here, the Knight of Wands. Almost none of the Salamanders are in a full circle. In fact, it is not until the level up of the Knight of Wands that some of these Salamanders become completely enclosed in a shape of what is known as the Ouroboros. In Greco-Egyptian mythology, this is the depiction of a serpent or a dragon eating its own tail, cycling and referring to birth, death, and rebirth cycles. This same salamander shows up later on in the story of the King of Wands, no longer on his garment, but instead on the cloak that he is wearing that covers him. And every single salamander is now in a fully enclosed circle. What is the salamander, though? What it is it is a symbol in mythic history, largely popularized in Europe by a man named Paracelsus. Paracelsus is a gentleman who is also largely responsible for popularizing your chemistry sets in science across Europe. But he was a man who told stories about mythic elemental creatures, and the salamander was one of them, who he said had the ability in its mythology. He didn't think salamanders were really doing what I'm about to talk about, but he said that salamanders in mythology, in a mythic story sense, had the ability to withstand the fires of a blacksmith's forge. The same blacksmiths that you would see that were creating with a hammer, a sword, or an axe. Those kind of blacksmiths from the Middle Ages. Imagine a salamander crawling into a fire and coming out unscathed, or better yet, putting out the fire. It was a testimony to the salamander's ability to take its willpower and through the suffering of the fire come out stronger and more refined. This is what's happening to your person. The cycle that this person is going through that keeps this person away from you is much bigger than just you or them. It is a grand cycle completion that they are going through that's likely going to impact them and the people that they come into contact with from here on out. Family, friends, they are going through the fire. What I think is really interesting as well is the Queen of Swords is sitting here. Aside from the king energy of the King of Wands, we've got the Queen of Swords. And Arthur Edward Waite spoke about the Queen of Swords being connected to deep mourning, deep loss, sometimes even associated with the feeling of a widow. And whether you're a widow or not, grief can hit us all, where a loss can feel so deep when you're not with a certain person that it feels like you are grieving in the way that a widow does. Everybody's circumstance, of course, is to each their own. But I noticed in this reading that while the Queen of Swords is here, looking towards a man who is stuck in the Hanged Man, on the other side of the reading was the King of Swords who was stuck. This is a pair with a union of the air quality. Both the king and the queen are here, discussing this idea that somebody is not able to go forward until they level up their cycle with the King of Wands energy. It's also interesting that the Chariot card is the card of solving riddles. One card usually connects to the next in a tarot reading. So naturally, we have the card of a riddle needing to be solved and confusion shining over them. But this confusion is being clarified with clarity, with answers that are going to be coming. In this retrograde cycle, instead of this person coming back, they're going through the leveling up, and what you will be receiving is the answers to your confusion and the part that you have to play in this. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit of an interesting story concerning these little flickers here in the background. A small and seemingly insignificant symbol on tarot, because of course when we do readings, like I just did before, when I talked about Paracelsus, I love getting into ancient history and mythology when we do our readings. And those little blips of fire that look like little sparks of light are actually in the shape of the yod or the jot. Yot, it depends on the translation that you have, but it is the smallest letter in the Hebrew alphabet. The story goes that all the other letters in creation of this alphabet came from this little letter. It was the spark of the divine. Now, the interesting thing is why this ended up on the depiction of the moon card in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. Because this deck has often been perceived of as if it is connected to Hebraic traditions or Kabbalism or Jewish traditions, when in reality, when you read the pictorial key to the tarot, you will notice woven within the tapestry of the tarot deck, the Rider-Waite-Smith deck specifically, the author had a fascination with a group known as the Albigensians. And the Albigensians are not a Jewish sect. In fact, they believed the God of the Old Testament was a troubling lower deity who was causing suffering in the world. Arthur Edward Waite mentions the story of the Albigensians, and it is his belief that the origins of tarot may have better been suited as their symbolic language, a secret language holding their story, after they were crusaded against in the 1200s. The Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church, said off with their heads to these people because naturally a group of people who were telling the story of the God of the Old Testament being a troublesome individual or deity was troubling to the church. And why and what did these Albigensians therefore believe in? They believed in a divine spark that was put into humanity from the divine feminine. No word of a lie. One of the most widespread belief systems that you hardly hear about is stories like the divine feminine that most people do not realize sit in different cultures of Christianity, like the Manichaeans, the Bogomils, Gnosticism, Valentinians, Sethians. The Manichaeans, as an instance, who also carried this truth of this divine feminine who had a spark leading all of us, was the world's first world religion, spreading its way all the way from Europe straight in and past the Middle East and straight into China, not on the border of China. This Christian sect made its way into China. For 1,500 years, believers by the thousands believed a divine feminine was more appropriate. in connection to Christianity than the God of the Old Testament. And we simply don't hear these things because the main three religions of the world are in favor of the God of the Old Testament. I'm bringing this up, though, because the idea of the divine feminine in this little sparks and these little lights, according to the Albigensians, was somebody being led to their path. And what do you think that means for you and your person? For you and your person. It is a path that you are being guided through and that this person is being guided through. Now you see these two towers on either side? Do you notice that there's no doors to these towers? You and your person, the King and the Queen of Swords here, locked away in a tower that they have walked into but has no escape from until they are guided by the little lights of the divine so that they can purify themselves and get through. I also want to mention that these two dogs on the moon card show up on the Ten of Pentacles completely purified in the color of white. That is what this person is going through. That is why there is confusion. Confusion because you wonder why this could have happened. You wonder why this person is not messaging. The light of the divine is making it so only they message at the right time, only they level up at the right time, and the path that you go through is specifically one that will bring you to the illumination of the sun. Remember, the moon card is encompassed with the symbolism of the sun, and you have received the sun card at the same time. I want to say one thing else that's very important to this reading that I have left to the very end. The Seven of Pentacles is here in the upright. The Seven of Pentacles, the symbol of the money tree, is a card of great abundance, showing that your previous efforts are going to work out for you in the end. And the Ace of Wands, showing raw energy and passion, is going to bring you to the Nine of Cups, your wish fulfillment. It may not happen in this retrograde season because of this cycle that is occurring right now, but it will happen in time as it's desired and as it is meant to be. You just have to keep enduring. As it was said in philosophies and ancient scriptures, endureth until the end. There's an ancient biblical concept that says if you ask the universe or God for water, you must dig the ditch and wait for the water to flow. This is what you're doing. Ask, believe, and receive is the energy of this. But now you have faith to endure until the end. Keep holding on. And when I say keep holding on, I don't mean torturously. I don't mean by ruminating. I mean with the ability to know that you are allowed to move forward. You're allowed to go forward. If a person is meant for you, you could kick them to the side 500 times in a row. You could move forward and date somebody else. If that person is meant for you, the universe brings them back. Swing right together. And this is even if you want to believe in modern Christianity, the idea of predetermination is all over the place. You can't have the book of Revelations, or you can't have Jesus showing that somebody refused him 3 times without the ability for things to be predetermined. You can look at Hinduism and the story of Kali, and you could understand even in that tradition that you have a deity who will not let you go off the path. You can go to the heretics of Christianity and the divine feminine Sophia with the trimorphic protonoia texts that were dug up and buried for 2,000 years, and they will say the same thing. Your path is being inspired by the spirit that's within you. You can't lose your path. In each tradition you go to, this is always the same thing. So your job is to not sit in fear. Your job is to move forward, and the pieces will fall into exactly where they should. You can always move forward, and the universe will bring you back with the person you're supposed to be with. And if you are not meant to be with a person, you know what you can do then? You get to move forward anyways. So for you, it looks like the only answer is to keep growing and moving forward, and this person will meet you at the time the universe brings you to that point of readiness. I know this is a reading that has to do with their level up, but you are in the mix of this. This is your own level up. Looking into things like how to endure until the end, or looking into the law of non-resistance, spiritually elevating yourself will be very useful at this time, since this person is going through a deep cycle of change that impacts you. And because you have the Queen of Swords here, I would want to make sure that you tackle energies of grief while you go through this, because you would not want those grief energies or those cloudy energies, the winds of the storms of your emotions, to have any kind of prolonging suffering that comes to you by the time you get to the point of your wish fulfillment in this situation. All right, thank you very much for listening to this Mercury retrograde reading. Aries, I am on now to do the sign of Taurus. I will talk to you guys later. If you'd like a private reading, you can check my link in the bio or the description below. Or if you'd like, you can just chat with me on a place like Facebook. If you look up Linny D, I'm the only Linny D with green hair. Actually, I just dyed my hair blue, so at some point I'll get those pictures up and I will show my fancy self. All right, many blessings to you guys. Thank you very much, and ciao for now.